In the last chapter, we talked about the formal structure of an organisation, how the organisation is put together on a piece of paper, setting out who does what, who do they report to. Organisational culture is the informal organisation. It's what actually happens inside an organisation. Now, organisational culture, the way we do things around here. Now, as an example of this, when I originally started work, I was not an accountant. I worked as a school teacher, and I actually worked as a school teacher, excuse me, teaching 10-year-olds. Now, that's got a very particular way of working. You are basically left entirely or pretty much on your own. You close the door, there's you and the 30 11-year-olds and 10-year-olds, and you basically do whatever you want. So I was in charge of running that classroom, and I did that for about 3 years. I then trained with KPMG, so I decided I didn't want to be a teacher, I wanted to be an accountant. Don't ask me why. So I trained with KPMG, completely different kind of culture, because KPMG was all about, here is the KPMG way that you will do things, and you will write things down in this way, and you'll explain things in this way. One of the things, for example, that we did at KPMG when I was there, I was not allowed to send a letter to anybody unless it had been checked by a manager. That's just the way that things were done. Now, there were obvious ways why they were done like that, and I can understand them. We'll talk about those in a minute. But the hardest thing that I found, going from being a school teacher to working at KPMG, it wasn't the work. I mean, being an auditor was okay. It was the culture. It was going from I'm the boss to I have to ask everybody and get everything double-checked. And I found that really, really difficult. Now, working as a lecturer, I've now gone back, in effect, to being a school teacher, because I do this the way that I want to. It's a different culture again. If I went back again to KPMG, I would find it incredibly difficult. Similarly, if somebody left KPMG and came straight here, and I simply said to them, right, there's the notes, get on and do whatever you like, they would find that very difficult. It's a very different way of working. So culture is the way that we do things. As an accountant, you may well find during your career that you work in different finance departments. You may even be doing the same tasks, but the way that the organisation operates will be very different. Is it like a school, which in a way is very laid back, you do your own thing? Is it like KPMG, which is very formal? There's nothing wrong with either of them, they're just different, and it makes it difficult to move. So, when we're talking about the way we do things, we're talking about things like values. What's important? As a school teacher, the most important thing is educating the students. Doesn't really matter how you do it. Attitudes. For example, are we going to talk about trying new ideas? Let's see if this works. Let's see if that works. KPMG, I don't think so. You do it the way you're told. Norms and expectations, to a certain extent, are the same thing. What is expected of you? Now, for example, when I am teaching, when I was teaching in a school, I would always wear a shirt and a tie, because being a school teacher, I felt I ought to. But I wouldn't wear a suit, so I'd have a shirt and tie and I'd have a pair of trousers. As a lecturer, I always wear a suit. And the reason why I wear a suit is I'm a professional, and I am instilling in my students the fact that I am a professional. I feel I ought to wear a suit to present the right image. It does not say anywhere in my contract that I have to wear a suit. I could wear a pair of jeans and a t-shirt if I wanted to. There's nothing to stop me, except the culture of the organisation is you should look professional. The key thing is it's leaving it up to the person. At KPMG, they had a dress code. So there was no choice. You had to wear certain things. And it was actually a disciplinary offence if you didn't. So, for example, when I was there, you had to wear, as men, you had to wear a white shirt or a blue shirt. You weren't allowed anything else. It was one of my colleagues who had an air stud, and he was allowed to wear it in the office, but he wasn't allowed to wear it out to a client. Now, I am talking 20 years ago, but those were the rules. Those were the norms and the expectations. The thing was that they told you what they were going to be, and you had to follow them. in our college, there aren't any rules, but people do tend to follow the same things anyway. As I say, most people will wear a suit because it's expected. So, factors that make a difference to your organisational culture. Small company or large company? Small companies tend to be much more informal. Do whatever you think's best. One of the reasons why KPMG have so many rules, understandably, is because they're a multinational organisation. You can't have people going around doing whatever they want to on an audit. It just wouldn't make any sense. So, the size, the amount of technology might make a difference to your culture. Often, if you don't have a lot of technology, you are perhaps left more to do what you want to. So, the only technology I really have here is a laptop, but I can use it in whatever way I want. If I have to use a lot of technology, it will force me to do things in a certain way. History. Is it an old company or is it young? Again, younger companies tend to be more flexible about what they will let people do. Older companies, ones that have been around for a while, tend to be very much more, it's always been done this way. Who owns it? Is it a PLC owned by lots of shareholders? Is it a small family company? Again, it will make differences to the way that things are done. We've got things like diversity and age. Diversity, do you have lots of different kinds of people there? Or is everybody very much the same? If everybody's very much the same, the culture will become, we do it the way that we're all happy with. Diversity, you'll have a much bigger variety. The structure will make a difference. Is it flat? Or is it tall? From the last chapter, flat organisations, more flexibility. You get on and do whatever you think's best. Tall organisations, I can manage more. I can manage only 3 people. I'm going to supervise them very closely. You will do what I say. Now, again, the thing with all of these is there is nothing wrong with any kind of cultures. The only thing you have to think about is the culture appropriate to the particular company? That's the key thing. So, it says here, the link between leadership and culture. Whoever starts an organisation creates the culture. If you have a company that's started by 3 engineers, you will tend to get lots of precision. You'll tend to get lots of rules. You'll tend to get lots of procedures, because that's the sort of thing that engineers would want. If I've offended any engineers, I do apologise. On the other hand, if a company started by some lecturers, it will probably tend to be relatively informal, because that's the kind of personalities that lecturers tend to have. So one of the things that Shine says is the first people are very, very important. And of course, the thing with culture is that as you employ more people, you tend to employ people who will fit in with the culture. If they don't fit in, you don't want them in the first place. Or if you do employ them by mistake, they will find out if they don't like it and they'll leave. So you end up with lots of people in the organisation who all do things in the same way. And what Shine is saying is, people who come after the first people have got to understand that. So they're going to come into an organisation where things are done in a certain way, and it's difficult to change. Now, certain things make a difference as far as Shine is concerned. Artefacts, and that simply means things like displays. All that means is things such as, do we have an Employee of the Month scheme? And if so, what do we use to judge it? That will have something to do with the culture. This person is the best employee because they have sold the most. They have given the best customer service. Those two, different rules for giving the Employee of the Month, different kinds of cultures. First one, the culture will be sell, sell, sell. Second one, the culture will be look after the customer. Different customers. Espoused values. What that means is, what do we tell our customers? If we tell our customers something, it tends to mean that we have to deliver that. So if we promise the customer something, the culture will become, how do we deliver that? So if we say to the customer, come to us because you can get a basic product very cheaply and easily, the culture is deliver a cheap, easy product. If the customer is being told, come to us because we'll give you lots of helpful advice, then that's what the culture should be. Spending time with customers, even if they don't buy anything. So the espoused values. And the final one we've got there, what's called the basic assumptions. What do people actually believe in? Do we really believe that the customer is always right, or is that just something we say? Do we believe that we've actually got a good product, or are we just trying to sell things to customers that we don't believe in? Now, the last one is the most important one that's there. It's the most difficult to identify. So these are the kind of things that make up the culture of an organisation. Now, a very useful model, if we're talking about culture, is the ideas of a guy called Charles Handy. And Charles Handy, this is the sort of thing that you'll get in the exam. This would very much suit a scenario question. Here is a situation. What kind of culture is it? Right, power cultures then. A power culture basically means that there is a boss who tells everybody else what to do. The boss has the power. Do this because I'm the boss. You might remember from the last chapter, entrepreneurial structures, where there's a boss and a team. A power structure, one person makes all the decisions. It's got exactly the same advantages and disadvantages that we saw earlier. It's quick. The trouble is that the people working for the boss just get used to doing what they're told. They can't think for themselves if the boss isn't there. A role culture. A role culture is where there's lots of rules and procedures. Imagine that you work for a bank and your job is when somebody applies for a credit card, you have to decide, do they get a credit card and how much credit do they get? Now, that ought to have lots of procedures that you follow. You check this, you check that, you calculate this, you do that, so that whoever actually processes this application, it shouldn't make any difference. If I send my credit card application 5 times to the same bank, I should get the same answer 5 times. Everybody should say, no, you don't get a credit card. Or they should also, yes, you get a credit card and your credit limit is $1,500. I should get exactly the same answer each time. If that's what we have, we will have a role culture. The whole idea behind a role culture is it makes no difference who does the job. The outcome will be the same. Now, that's great if you want to be consistent. That's great if you want a standardised product and service. The trouble is, it's very inflexible. Task cultures, on the other hand, do what's needed. Do whatever you feel is best to solve this customer's problem. They are, in a way, the complete opposite of a role culture. Task cultures are very, very, very flexible, which is great. We can do what helps the customer. The trouble is they're very, very inconsistent. I go to 3 different people and I get 3 different answers. I've come to you and you're telling me this, but your colleague told me that yesterday. You're telling me something different. So in the exam, there is no correct answer. They've all got different strengths. Now, in real life, you don't get any of these 4, but you get variations on them. They'll be close to something. And the key thing is, although none of them are right, one of them might be the most appropriate one. So in a bank, a role culture is the most appropriate one. For a lecturer, a task culture is probably the most appropriate one. Now, the bottom one there, a person culture, is where, in effect, it's not really about a company at all. It's about lots of individuals who all happen to work in the same place. So, for example, I've got a doctor's surgery down there. All the doctors, in effect, operate on their own. They all do their own thing, seeing their own patients. All they do is share an office. The same could be true of people who perhaps sell real estate, estate agents, as we call them in the UK. They perhaps share an office, but apart from that, they pretty much get on and do their own thing. Person cultures are probably the least common out of all of them. So you just need to know those 4, what to look for in the exam, lots of rules, procedures, or people doing what they want, and what's good about them, bad about them. That one suits multiple choice questions because there's 4 possibilities, and in most multiple choice questions, there's 4 possible answers. Final one we've got there about culture is by a guy called Hofstadter. And Hofstadter simply says that you will get different cultures in different countries because of the way that people act. Now, what this means is that companies that are based in certain countries behave differently. An American company behaves differently to a Japanese company, which behaves differently to a British company because culturally Japan, America and Britain are different. Now, he doesn't say that any of these cultures are good or bad. He simply says they are different for various reasons. So, for example, in America, it's very much based around individuals. So, I want to do this. Japan is much more collective. So the idea is that in Japan, most companies are much more used to operating as a team. In the UK and in the States, they're much more based around individuals doing something. Now, the kind of times when you have difficulties then is if you have a Japanese group of workers trying to work with an American group. So maybe there's been an acquisition or whatever reason, they won't work very well together because they both expect to do things in different ways. Power distance. Does the worker simply accept what the boss tells them, or do they question it? Now, again, different countries tend to have different attitudes towards that. So, again, that would make a difference if you put workers from different countries together. Masculinity versus femininity has got nothing to do with men and women. What it's talking about there is we're talking about the masculine approach, which, again, is very much, I'm the boss, I'm only interested in getting the work done. That's very much like, if you remember, when we talked about White and Lewin, we talked about task-focused managers. Femininity is more to do with country club managers. So in other words, a masculine manager says, get the work done, that's the end of it. Feminine managers, again, be they male or female, doesn't make any difference, are worried about, is the worker happy? Is the worker enjoying their job? Have they got job enrichment? Have they got interesting tasks? Do they feel motivated? It's worrying about the wider personality. The masculine approach is, I'm the boss, you're the worker, there's the work, get on and do it. It's just different. And again, you get these in different countries. Hofstede says that Scandinavian countries, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, are well known for the fact that they look at the entire personality of a person, not just getting the work done. So they've got more feminine traits. Uncertainty avoidance. Do people like to be left on their own or not? Uncertainty avoidance, tell me exactly what you want me to do and I will do it. As soon as I've done it, I'll come back to you so you can tell me what to do next. Uncertainty, if you're happy to do that, tell me what task you want and let me go away and worry about how to do it. I'll see you when I'm done. So again, different countries tend to have different kinds of personalities. So again, the Japanese model is very much uncertainty avoidance. Tell people what to do and then they'll let you know how they're getting on. Again, not that Hofstede is saying anything's wrong, it's just different. And finally, time orientation. Do we think of short term or do we think long term? The UK is criticised often for having a very short time orientation. Managers make decisions for a year at the most, maybe 6 months. China, until recently, has been well known for thinking 20, 30, 40 years ahead. So again, nothing wrong with either, they're just different. The key thing that Hofstede is interested in is what happens if you try and expand internationally. If there is an acquisition, you have one group of workers in one country who are used to one way of doing things, and you now try and do a different way, you're going to have problems. The other thing there is, what about your customers? Your customers might be interested in a certain thing, and you are going to do things in a different way, and again, you're going to have problems. So, culture is actually a very interesting topic to think about in the companies that you come across, whether it's somewhere you work, somewhere you deal with as a customer, somewhere you deal with as a supplier, however it is. But think about what kind of culture they've got, because if people don't fit in with the culture, then there will be difficulties. Where maybe the culture needs to be changed. So maybe we've got a task culture which needs to be changed to a role culture. Customers are complaining we're inconsistent. Role cultures are more standardised. So maybe that's what we need to do. So in the exam, culture tends to come up, not all the time, but it's a relatively frequent question because it's talking about people. Particularly Charles Handy. That one will probably be more frequent than the other ones because, as I say, 4 different types of culture, 4 different possible answers. That one comes up a lot. So, structure and culture, in effect, are 2 sides of the same thing. The structure is the bit you can see on a bit of paper. I can see who does the work. I can see who's the boss. I can see who they report to. But the culture is the way that they do it. Are there lots of rules? Or are you just left to get on and do what you want? So the two of them, very important together.